Welcome to the LSL Podcast. I'm Derek McKenna and I'm joined as always by Andy McNulty. Andy, how are you this evening?
Good, Derek. Yeah, a bit lost for games over the last few weeks, but other than that, I'm all good.
Excellent. So on episode 10 of the LSL podcast, we have the usual roundup of the big games from this past weekend, as well as a preview of some of the big games coming up this weekend and some of the recent cup draws that have been done in the LSL. As well as that, we'll be discussing some issues raised by listeners in our new section called Listeners Corner. So looking forward to getting stuck into some debate and conversation there with yourself, Andy. But before that, we'll have a look at the big games from the past weekend.
Yeah, I was surprised. There seemed to be a lot of action over the weekend, considering, I suppose, the lack of games the last few weeks with the weather and stuff like that. So it was good, first and foremost, that games went ahead, and even better that there was some really, really entertaining games over the weekend.
Yeah, obviously from my perspective, the biggest game of the weekend was on Thursday night, which obviously you seen. I think you seen most of that yourself, did you?
Yeah, I think I just missed the first 5 minutes.
Right, and your impressions of the game, St. Francis against Kilbarrack United over in John Hoyland Park. First of all, your impressions of the new Astro over there.
Look, to be honest with you, it looks different class now under the lights and everything. It just makes a bit of a difference, doesn't it? And it's brand new, so yeah, it looks top quality. In fairness, I can see them going from strength to strength. Especially, I didn't realise until Thursday night that they actually play their home games on the Thursday night, which I found amazing. I actually never clicked it, to be honest with you, before. So I would imagine that will probably attract a few players, because if they can keep the weekends to themselves and still play on the Thursday night, I would imagine that's a fairly decent pull for any player.
Yeah, actually, I only noticed that myself because obviously you're not kind of keeping an eye on other teams and what nights they play on until you play them yourself. And I noticed Francis are playing next week on Thursday as well at home. So it must be a consistent thing for them, and I think it is. It's probably a good idea in the sense that lads keeping most weekends free. It definitely is a draw.
Yeah, I was interested. I was interested to see. I suppose if there's anyone listening that's from Francis, just to let us know, like from their training schedule point of view, does that mean they only train once a week then, or? Well, I suppose if they're in weeks that they're playing home games, obviously they're only training once a week. But I would imagine that's the case. Is it? I don't know. Like if they're playing an away game and it's on a Sunday, I would imagine they still train Tuesday, Thursday. But on home games, yeah, I don't know whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage, because you're only getting one session in. So yeah, curiosity more than anything.
They could be training Monday and Wednesday and then playing on a Thursday. I know, didn't we speak to Stephen Costello last week, and he mentioned that Kevin's training on a Thursday and play on a Friday. So maybe a light session on the Thursday. Impressions of the
possibly.
game. It was a big game going into it. Just to kind of set the context, Kilbarrack were 8 points clear. If St. Francis had 2 games in hand, if St. Francis had won that game, and their 2 games in hand, they would have overtaken Kilbarrack. Obviously, Kilbarrack hoping to win to stretch the gap at the top. Your impressions of the game?
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, Derek, I thought it was a fairly even game. I didn't see a 3-1 scoreline, to be honest with you, at half time. I thought if both teams, I'd say they would have settled for a draw. Francis were decent. They were very busy in the first half, but they just were very deflated in the second half. In fairness to Kilbarrack, they suffered 2 or 3 injuries in the first half, and I thought that was going to be the end of them now.
It actually turned out to be a blessing, really.
Yeah, well,
the reorganisation. Like, look, we took the lead after 20 minutes, probably against the run of play. St. Francis would have been disappointed not to be in front at that stage. They'd had a few chances. Then 10 minutes after we took the lead, they equalised. It was an OG. I actually thought Caffrey got it, but one of our defenders told me it went in off his head. So 30 minutes in, it was 1-1, and Francis would have been disappointed going into the break level. But like you mentioned, we'd had a couple of injuries in the first half. We're forced to reorganise the back line. We started with a back 3, we went to a back 4. Ross Carrick come on, and I felt that kind of steadied the ship a bit. And in the second half, I think, as you mentioned, St. Francis looked a bit deflated when they came out for whatever reason. and we just kicked on. I think
I,
when I
I
was
think the reshuffle was, you're right, Eric. I think the reshuffle to four at the back probably just consolidated the lads a little bit. Like, no offense to the guys in the first half, I thought they did reasonably well, but obviously the injuries, you have to do that reshuffle. But I think a solid four at the back. I know it's a very favourable thing to do nowadays, is to go three and the fullbacks and get them up and down the line, but I just thought the way the game was going with the solid four just set up a foundation for Kilbarrack to really soak up the pressure, and then on the counter, because I know that Kilbarrack side have a few older legs in the team, so having to run around after some of the Francis young lads wouldn't have been too healthy for them for a full second half. So I think it was probably a blessing in disguise, to be honest with you. The injuries, it would have been interesting how it would have played out if they had kept the original formation and the original players. But that's football for you, isn't it? I suppose you have to adapt and get on with it.
exactly, and then we kind of got those two kind of goals midway through the second half through Ryan Fitzsimons and Gavin Carroll, giving us a 3-1 lead. And after that, you kind of, although it was nervous for those of us who are not impartial and kind of, nervous that Francis might get back into it, but I don't think they really, really threatened us after that. I think we kind of held firm with the forward at the back, and obviously a massive, massive 3 points, which means now even if Francis win their games in hand, they're still 5 points behind us. St. Kevin's then are in third. They have 5 games in hand on us, on Kilbarrack, and they have to win all 5 to draw level, which is obviously a huge ask. So yeah, look, a huge game. But we'll see. Like, there's a long way to go in that league. Obviously, with games in hand for teams, if the teams win all their games in hand, it's a lot closer than
Yeah.
what it looks at the moment.
What I would say is, like, from a neutral point of view, some very, very good passages of play on those both sides. So obviously you can see why they're both up there. They've two managers that want to play the right way. I thought they were two very, very good footballing sides. They tried to get the ball down and play it. Now obviously Francis had to resort to a little bit longer ball with maybe 20 minutes to go, which probably again played into the advantage of Kilbarrack. But like, two teams really trying to do the right stuff, and they've some really good players, actually, to be honest with you, both sides, some young players, so probably a couple of players to watch out for in the future as they progress up the leagues.
Yeah, definitely young and old in both sides. No more so, I think, from young Jason Beasley, who got I think it was his 12th goal of the season. I need to check on that. But he's only 17 years of age. He come up from our
Yeah,
under
looks a big
17 team.
prospect, all right.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned St. Kevin's. They had a huge game on Friday night over in St. Aidan's School in the FAI Intermediate Cup. I actually made it out to that one as well. Absolutely horrendous weather conditions. When I was coming out the door, it didn't look as bad as what it actually ended up to be. And I lost one umbrella. I had to go get a second one. The wind was atrocious, and the weather had a big part in the game. It was a very kind of sloppy game in the first half. Although Carl Summers got the opener for St. Mocta's, sliding the ball under the advancing keeper after a superb through ball. I think it was Mick Daly who played the through ball. You'll be able to see it on the video, actually. You'll see it on St. Kevin's and St. Mocta's, I think, have videos up of it. But great through ball for Carl Summers to open the score. And Stephen Cantwell got a leveller from the spot soon after a Stonewall penalty decision. He also hit this post soon after, and you were kind of sensing there was a bit of an upset on the cards. No idea how it stayed out, to be quite honest, because it kind of hit the inside of the post and rolled all the way across the line. But somehow managed to stay out. Then Kevin's took the lead with a cracker from Bobby O'Reilly from just outside the D. Kind of side footed it into the bottom corner, but it was a kind of half volley type thing as well, and gave Kevin's the lead. But literally a minute later, Summers scored again. Kind of a ball over the top, and the keeper came racing out, and he just lobbed it over the keeper. So that was lovely. And then the second half, again, the weather was really atrocious, like really strong winds, and it kind of ruined the game. But the introduction of Garrett McCaffrey, who obviously was on the podcast a few weeks ago, kind of swung it in Mox's favour. He was causing trouble up front as the half wore on. Although both sides had chances, Mox's threatened a little bit more, and his strike, although he claimed the goal, his strike definitely went in off a defender's leg to make it 3-2, and puts Mox's into the semi-final. So look, it's probably the result people expected. I must admit, I was hugely impressed with Kevin's. I thought they really kind of matched St. Mocta's on the night. It didn't look like there was the divisional differences between the two sides. It was a very, very competitive game. So I think St. Kevin's can kind of hold their head high. in the performance that they put in. They'd be disappointed, obviously, to lose the game, but mocked us into the semi-final there.
Yeah, I think, as you say, probably the expected outcome. But like I suppose Kevin's can take some positive from it, where they've really run a really good mock the side close. Obviously taking the lead as well would have given them a bit of a frightener if only they could have held on. I know they conceded like pretty much after they scored, so obviously they'll be disappointed in that. But look, it's a great experience for their lads, and hopefully it'll stand a good favour for them in the league, and it'll give them a real push that they need.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, they looked really impressive at home in St Aidan's School there on the Astro. So look, it'll probably give them that little boost to kick on, knowing that they can match the top teams at home as they go into the final stages of the season in the league. So another huge game on Sunday. I know we spoke a lot about Kilnamanagh over the last few weeks. Obviously, we were speaking to their manager last week, but they had an away trip to Clester Donecarney in the FAI Intermediate Cup, and unfortunately for them, couldn't see it through. They did take the lead after 10 minutes. Gary McCabe free kick from 25 yards. And they weathered a bit of a storm by all accounts after that to take it into the break level. But Clester and Carney, it actually looked like it was swinging Kilnaman's way. 63 minutes on the clock. Clester and Carney went down to 10 men after Mick Kelly was sent off for a second yellow. But then they got a penalty soon after, which Stephen Chambers slotted home. So it was 1-1. Then it sounded like the game had it all. I wish I had made it to this one. Kilnamanagh actually went down to 10 with Harding sent off, another second yellow there. And then the winning goal came with about 5 minutes to go for Clester Donecarney with Sean Rogers slotting home. So two of the senior Sunday big boys into the semi-finals there with St. Moctus and Clester Donecarney.
Yeah, again, probably the more favoured or favourable results or outcome, but like again, Kilnamanagh running them really close, taking the lead, and they'll probably be disappointed. I haven't spoken to any of the lads since the result, but I would imagine they're really disappointed, but sort of proud in the same sense. So I would imagine they're very close to where Kevin's are feeling at the moment. They'll probably use it as a good boost in their league campaign, and hopefully set them in good stead for the remainder of their league campaign.
Yeah, and obviously another side, I haven't actually got it in the notes here, Andy, but another side that went in, which I totally forgot about, that went into the semi-finals as well, is Malahide United. 2-0 win over Maynooth University Town on Friday night. Darren Craven and Levi Boardman with the 2 goals there. So that's three. That's like, it's 3 of the top 3, I think, in the senior Sunday, is it? I need to just check the table
Yeah,
there,
that's
but
right.
3 of the
Yeah,
top
well,
4
that'll be
are into this intermediate cup semi-finals, and the other one, I think, who's the other quarter final? It's the Cork sides, isn't it? As far as I
yeah,
can.
that's right. I can't put a name on them now at the moment, but yeah, they'll definitely be worried about the Dublin sides because they're in good form in the league, and obviously they're going well through the cup as well. You'd probably fancy one of the Leinster Senior League sides to go on and win it. I just think they're that little bit stronger than the Cork sides at the moment. But in fairness to the Cork teams, they'll always put up a fight and they'll be there or thereabouts, So I'm not writing them off as such, but I would probably just edge favourites going to the Leinster Senior League.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure, and I'm sure one of the listeners can tell us this and tweet us in. And I'm not sure if the draw has been done for the semi-final yet. I don't think it has.
I
But
haven't
as
seen
far
anything on it, so
Yeah, I know. Like, we're touching on in a little while. The FAI Junior draw is Tuesday. Tuesday, which is tomorrow. Tuesday is tomorrow 25th or whatever date that is. That's coming up. But I haven't heard anything about the Intermediate Cup. Other kind of big games, just kind of honourable mentions over the last weekend. Huge result for Cherry Orchard. 2-2 draw at home to Bangor. Bangor will be a bit sick about that, I think, because they're still kind of up the top end of the table. Hopefully, going to in that title race, and they would have felt, based on Cherry Orchard's form up until the game, that they would have got more from that. But big result for Cherry Orchard, 2-2 draw there. What What else was there, Andy? Anything else in there was senior one? There
Yeah,
was
so senior one league slip against Lucan United. So Lucan, I think, had a late penalty against there to win 3-2. So Lucan remains second in the table with league slip in six. So that's probably a big win for the Lucan side. And then obviously on the other side of the table, Swords went down to the cage in Ringsend and beat Patsy Y 2-1. So that's a big upset. Barry Caulfield with a hand on the two goals for Swords. So yeah, look, it's a big win for Swords. I think it's only their third win this season, and that'll put a bit of a dampener on CY's sort of promotion hopes for the season. So hopefully it doesn't knock them too soon. But you know, it's a big result for Swords.
definitely. And we just not 100% in this, but I think we might be speaking to someone from St. Pat's CY next week, so we'll get their perspective on that, on their on how their season is going so far. In the senior 1A, kind of it was second versus fourth. So Tolka against Arklow, Tolka in fourth, Arklow fourth. So Tolka remain in second and Arklow remain in fourth after a draw. Bit of a ding-dong battle there. Tolka taking the lead twice, but pegged back on both occasions. So two sides in hoping to go back up through the divisions there. And then the other result in that division, St. John Bosco beat Templeogue 3-1, keeps Bosco in the hunt for a second successive promotion. And obviously, another huge game at the weekend was the FAI Junior Cup game. We mentioned it last week. Oliver Bond Celtic were away to Ferrybank down in Waterford. A massive game for the inner city Dublin side, going all the way down to Waterford. And I believe they had a few busloads of supporters they brought down with them. And the turned out to be a cracking game.
Yeah, Derek, obviously a great result for the club. Three times they fell behind in the game and three times they pulled it back. So 2-0 to Ferrybank with 20 minutes to go. Mitchell and Cannon to pull it back for the Bond to send it into extra time. Ferrybank then went ahead again in extra time, and Aaron Fagan levelled it up for the Bond to take it to the penalties. And thankfully for the Leinster Senior League side, they progressed through. I think it was 5-4 on penalties. So yeah, it's a good all round result for the league and for the team. I've seen a few tweets and videos on their way home on the bus. So it was a thoroughly and deserved victory, and I'm sure they all have sore heads this morning.
Yeah, yeah. I think everybody's seen the celebrations online on Twitter, and if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go onto the Oliver Bond Twitter page and see some of the lads singing on the bus on the way home. Obviously, hugely enjoying themselves after that result, and they go into the quarterfinals now, which is massive for the team, and they're in the Major One Sunday. They're flying high in that at the moment. I think they're in second spot in that league. Their second team is obviously top of their division as well. I can't remember which division it is, Andy, but I think I'll have it written down here. I think it's Division 3A Saturday. They're top of that division as well. So the club, a real good feel good factor about the club at the moment, and obviously going into the quarterfinals, the FEI Junior, where all the buzz that comes with that. It's massive for the club.
Yeah, I think we have the draw there as well. Is it the last eight? Well, no, not the draw, just the last eight teams. Fairview Rangers, the winner of Castlebar and Gorey, Killarney Celtic, Oliver Bond, obviously, Rush Athletic, Usher Celtic, Athenroy, and Westport. So, fair share of Leinster Senior League and country teams there. So it's plenty to play for hopefully get a nice, handy home draw for them.
Yeah, definitely. Three Leinster Senior League teams in the quarterfinals, which is great for the league. Rush Athletic, Usher, and Oliver Bond. I think a lot of people would like to see Usher and Oliver Bond in the final, two inner city Dublin sides, as we had a few seasons ago with Sheriff and Liffey Wanderers, and that was a great final as well. So it'd be interesting to see how the draw pans out. But as I said, great to have three LSL sides represented there in the final stages.
Yeah, it's great for the league. It's great for everyone involved.
Right, so I think after rounding up the big games of the weekend, we're going to move on to a kind of a new section now. In the absence of an interview this week, we're going to. I think you put it out there earlier in the weekend of asking listeners to kind of submit topics that they'd like us to talk about. So we'll call this section Listeners Corner. I think you ran a poll online as well, which I found really, really interesting, because it's something that's kind of Something that annoys me an awful lot as well. But I'll let you introduce what the poll you ran and the results to it, and then we'll have a chat about it.
Yeah, I suppose just to put some context around it, we're sort of pushing for a little bit more engagement with the podcast and the episodes coming up. So, like, if anybody has any suggestions, I've been kind of pulling them up over the last few weeks. People have been sending me messages and tagging me and stuff like that. So, like, that's great, and thanks very much for the input. If anyone has something that they want to talk about, like, I got a couple of texts, and this one was one in particular from a player who will remain unnamed just in case, so he doesn't get slaughtered at his club. But basically, it was should lads that are suspended or have short-term injuries be expected to attend games? And the overwhelming response was there was over 200 votes on this,
Right.
and it was 84% in favour of yes, that they should. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have followed up on this, saying that if, like, to the obviously to the people involved, if you are injured, do you go and see what the response is to that? Because obviously the expectation is that everybody should be there.
Yeah.
Um, and whether the reality is, obviously, is there for some clubs, I would imagine, because the fact that this question has been brought up, and to be honest with you, this was actually mentioned a couple of times to me, so it's obviously a topic that's sort of hot on the agenda for some clubs. So yeah, 84% in favour of those that are injured or suspended to turn up the games. I know it's been a long time since I've missed a game, whether that be through injury, suspension, or whatever. But I'd always like to think that I'm going to a game, home or away, especially the home games. I think they're a little bit more expectation. If you have to travel, you might get away with it a small bit, but it's definitely something that I think is probably hot on the agenda for some clubs, more than others. Obviously, it depends around your successful sort of period. If you're doing well, I'd imagine players are turning up. If not so well, you've probably got a few lads hiding.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of telling comments on that poll, and I'm not 100% sure who commented on it. I need to check back on it, but it was something around, if you look at the teams who are consistently successful, they're the ones whose players do show up when they're injured or suspended, and they're still showing up for training, and they're still showing up at match days as well. I
Yeah,
am
and I think
often, sorry, go ahead.
no, I think I'm not too sure if it was Gary Young or not, but I think he mentioned along the lines of, if you care, or you care enough, you'll be there. I
Yeah,
suppose that did hit the nail on the head on the topic. If you are involved and if you are committed to it, you'll make sure that you're there, because you were going to be there anyway if you're playing. Very rarely players are missing games if they're fully fit and available. So
yeah.
it makes the same commitment, I suppose.
I'm often astounded. I'm not talking just about Kilbarrack. I'm talking about like down through the years when I see teams with a player injured, especially. I could think you can kind of forgive if it's a long term injury. If you're out for a season, that maybe you're not going to be down every week watching the lads if you're out for the season. But if you're on, like, if you do something that's kind of, you're out for a couple of weeks or you're suspended for a couple of weeks, I'm astounded that lads don't be down at games. It really kind of blows my mind,
Yeah,
because when you see old men showing up to support their local club, in the lashings of rain and or whatever, in the freezing cold, and they trudge along, and in some cases paying a fiver to watch senior Sunday games or whatever the case may be, and a player on that team hasn't even got the, I won't say hasn't got the decency, but hasn't got the interest to show up and support their teammates. To me, is
yeah. There's
absolutely baffling.
there will be people that come back to you on that, Derek, and I 100% I hear what they're saying. Their retort to that probably may be that, look, it's an amateur game, we commit enough time, la 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 la. You hear that all the time. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think if you commit for a season, you commit regardless of whether you're playing or not. To be honest with you, I think that's a commitment that you make to yourself, to your family, and to your manager at the start of the year. Everyone enjoys a weekend off. Everyone. But I think you get enough throughout the season to be able to sacrifice 2 hours on a Sunday, or on a Saturday, Friday night, whatever it may be, to go and watch what are your teammates, and hopefully you're gonna have to rely on them at some stage throughout the season. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there are pros and cons to it. Don't get me wrong. And like I suppose the way I would be spinning that one, if I was a manager, would be saying, "Oh, Derek, you're injured. Yeah, no problem. Well, we've a game Friday night, and the physio's going to be there. So come on up, and they'll give you a rub down, or they'll give you whatever that may be. So you're sort of you're turning it back on them to say, well, we've got a physio available
Yeah.
at the game. Why don't you come and avail of it? That
I
would be
think that,
sort of the way I'd say.
to me, even that's trying to coax people down. In my view, you should want to be down watching your mates,
Yeah,
watching your
no, I
teammates. Like
agree.
to
I
me,
agree.
that's what baffles me, that lads don't actually want to come down and support the team that they play for. As I said, it just really kind of blows my mind that you wouldn't want to. And you can forgive anybody for missing one game or two games or whatever because you're away for a weekend, or if somebody's long term injured and they're not going to be down all the time. But if you're only out for a couple of weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, and you go missing for those 3 or 4 weeks until you're back again, to me that kind of shows me that you're not really interested too much. You're more thinking about yourself than thinking about the team.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it slightly off topic is the same with training. You see lads that aren't as interested anymore starting to slip away. Their attendances were normally decent at training, and all of a sudden they're working late, or they work on a Saturday or a Sunday when they haven't worked. It You tend to see kind of cycles of it,
Yeah,
and people falling in and out of love of the game. Don't get me wrong, I've been there. I've I've been sitting here and I've been saying to myself, "Oh, just let the game be called off because my head isn't in the right place." And it's but you still make an effort. You still make a commitment to the club and to the lads. Ultimately, you're in it together, and if you're letting the lads down, that's the way I see it.
yeah, and I think, as I said, that comment that I read, that ultimately the most successful teams, will have players who will show up whether they're injured or not and support the team, and it definitely lends to that level of kind of camaraderie around the team if lads who are out injured are still coming up to support the other lads who are on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, one of the topics that were sent to us was, should games go straight to penalties as a decider? This one, I never really gave it much thought, to be perfectly honest with you, but I think it's actually a really, really good idea.
I tell you what, Andy. Right, here's the thing: when I've been covering football obviously as a journalist in the past, and I absolutely detest the extra time, because especially on a cold night where it's absolutely freezing, it'd be about 10 minutes to go and it'd be 1-1, you'd be thinking, "Holy Jesus, don't let this go to extra time because my toes are about to fall off." And it's probably the same with players; they don't want to play for an extra half an hour, especially in intermediate football. In junior football, slightly different, 10 minutes each half, which is probably a little bit more palatable. But I can see. Look, I can see the pros and the cons of it. If it's a big game, a big cup game, maybe there is a benefit of playing that extra time. Whereas if it's kind of a minor cup, maybe a league cup or something like that, national cup competitions, I can see the benefit of extra time, FAI junior, FAI intermediate. Whereas if it's a standard league cup game, and you don't want teams getting exhausted playing, 30 minutes of extra time after slogging for 90, then maybe there's a benefit of going straight to penalties in those type of games.
Yeah, I suppose the comment as well was that it's almost easier to lose on penalties. It's an easier to take. Um, you're after putting 120 minutes of football into the game, and it's a bit of a lottery. I know it's an old cliche, but it is a bit of a lottery. And I suppose, like, look, it
It
can
makes
kind of favor the underdog because there's less pressure on them, I suppose, or I don't
Well,
know.
what it
It's
also
just
does,
definitely
Andy,
worth
if
considering.
you go straight to penalties, it makes the last 10, 15, 20 minutes of a 90 minutes game much more exciting, because,
Yeah,
sometimes
true.
you see in a game that where teams know extra time is coming, they both kind of sit back in the last 20 minutes if it's a 1-1 draw or whatever, if they're drawn, and they both, neither of them want to go for it because they know, like, it's going to go to extra time anyway and then another half an hour to play out, and it can kind of create a bit of negative football there. Whereas if teams know that, look, we have to win this in ordinary time or else it's going to penalties and we've a huge chance of losing it, they're going to be throwing everything forward as well. Like, so I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
fair point.
Has it? I think it's been trialed elsewhere, has it not? In terms of other cup competitions around the world, where you just go straight to penalties, or am I wrong on that?
That has to be. It has to be like because like it's not the first time I would imagine it's been brought up. Yeah, it has to be. Like I'd be interested to see sort of what people's opinions are on it, and I don't have I don't really have a set opinion on it, to be honest with you, Derek, because it only kind of came into my thought process this week or over the last couple of weeks since it's been submitted in, and I don't know whether I'd be for or against it. I'd probably
What would
have to
you
have a
prefer
little
as a
bit of a
player, Andy? If you were in a cup game, would you prefer to have that extra time, or would you prefer? And especially, it probably affects you more as a goalkeeper. What would you prefer?
Um, to be perfectly honest with you, because I've always played in teams that would probably be the favourite in the game, I'd fancy us to go on and win an extra time.
Mm.
Um, that being said, a lot of the time, extra time is terrible because it's a very edgy affair. People are leggy, nobody wants to go and lose it, and I think half of the time people are already setting up for penalties. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're already thinking about penalties, even though half an hour of football is still a very long time.
Is it too
I
long
mean,
for amateur players? So, like you have the 10 minutes extra time for junior players and 15 for amateur, which is the same as professional. Should it kind of reduce for all amateur football back to 10 minutes?
possibly, yeah, because like there's very few times where I've seen an extra time game being played, and I've said to myself, "Jesus, that's really good football." Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like at the end of the day, we are amateurs. Lads are fit in this league. Don't get me wrong, but they still get tired after say 125 minutes of football. It's probably sufficient enough for quality wise. Um, but yeah, look, it's a hard one. It's a really interesting one, I suppose, and I don't know where the league's heads are at. It's whether it's even ever being considered or whatever. But yeah, it's a really good topic. I think it was a good suggestion for the listeners, I suppose. If you can kind of let us know, I might put out another poll during the week to see if anyone's in favour or against it, whatever.
yeah, definitely. What's the other topics that people wanted us to talk about? I can see the
Um,
next
I,
one on the
I
list there.
Yeah, I will mention this one, but obviously we won't go into great detail because I'll explain the reason why. Referees has sort of been a common theme or topic that people want to discuss, and the reason we haven't done it yet is we want to do it right. And what I mean by that is we want to set the right environment where we get the right person on to be interviewed, and we have the right list of questions, because what we don't want to turn into is either a witch hunt or a finger pointing exercise where people are going to come on and slaughter the referee, or the referee is going to get his back up and say, well, we've a job to do, we're only human, la 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 la, the usual stuff that you'll get when it comes to referees. It's a very contentious sort of topic, and it's a topic that I definitely am interested in, and I know you are as well, Derek. But we need to make the right environment so that we get the best out of the interview, and it could be a special, it could be an hour long special that we actually focus on for a referee. But as I said, I want to make sure it's the right type of interview because um, I think it will get good listens, and I want to be as objective in the interview as possible. I want to ask the right questions. I want to get the right answers from that individual. And we haven't really picked who we're going to get on board, and we're open to suggestions. But we want to get someone that will be open, honest, give us sort of his opinion on the game and how difficult it is to be a referee. To be fair, they get slaughtered every single week, but as the saying goes, the game doesn't go ahead without a referee. So,
Exactly.
we have to have them. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? And it's unfortunate that there's not enough of them in the game, and there's so many of them leaving the game because of the abuse that they get. And I'd be very interested to see how they deal with that side of the thing. So I want to do it right, and without sort of going too much into detail of it, we want to get the right person on the podcast so that we can talk about it in the right manner.
definitely. I think being a former referee, I think I did a season in the AOL, which was plenty for me. You
I
get a
didn't
different,
know that.
yeah, you get a different perspective when you actually kind of put on the black uniform and listen to some of the abuse that referees take. Don't get me wrong. Even on the sideline today, I'll give stick to referees, and I think everybody always will. But the fundamental thing that we always have to remember, and it's something that kind of Something that I always kind of say to myself, even though I may be screaming at a referee over a bad decision or what I interpret as a bad decision, is without that fella in the middle, we don't have a game. So no matter how good some referees are and how poor some others may be, and probably are in need of more training, no matter, we always have to come back to that fundamental of without that lad in the centre there, no matter how good or bad he is, there isn't a game. So I think you're right. It would be good to get a kind of an experienced referee on to talk to us about the pressures of being a referee and decisions that they have to make. Look, I, as a former referee, I know full well myself from speaking to other referees. You know when you've made a bad decision in a game, and sometimes it'll wreck your whole weekend because you'll kind of go over the decision again and again and kind of say, why did I make that decision on the spur of the moment? And then, did I get it wrong? You're constantly questioning yourself as a referee. I've spoke to referees about that before. So referees are all human at the end of the day. They don't go out to ruin people's weekends by what people interpret as bad decisions. They make a call based on what they see in a split second, and they think it's the right judgment at that second. Now maybe it's the wrong one at times, but I don't think there's any referees out there that intentionally go out to piss people off by making bad decisions or whatever. If
Yeah,
you're,
absolutely. And
even with VAR nowadays, they still get it wrong. So especially my heart sometimes goes out to lads who are in the centre of a pitch by themselves with no assistance and have to make offside decisions. It's impossible. Nobody can do that. It's a physical impossibility to judge an offside when you're standing 20 yards behind play. So it's all guesswork in that sense. I know sometimes I feel for lads having to make decisions on that, but look, it's a topic that creates a lot of controversy. But I think on this podcast, I'd never want to go on and start slagging referees for making bad decisions. There's some referees who make really, really good decisions and are great. And others sometimes, everybody makes mistakes. So, I'd rather not kind of let it descend into a referee slagging match. But it would be great to get a referee on here to get the perspective on what their experiences are like, how they deal with players who may be a little bit overly aggressive, and that type of thing.
and as you say there, Derek, like, I suppose it's like all walks of life. You'll get different personalities, you'll get different people. Like, at the end of the day, they're just a normal bloke or woman, depending on, obviously the different levels. I know there's a lot of female referees out there as well. So, you have to just judge them on as you see them at that point in time. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people kind of hold grudges towards certain individuals, and that's fine. That might be the reaction that they got at that point in time. But yeah, it's a very difficult position to be in, and I suppose, look, I'm looking forward to it myself because I do want to ask some of the difficult questions that some of the listeners would want to ask if they were in their position. So, without, as you say, it becoming an absolute slaughtering match, I want to be able to ask the right questions so that we get a good engagement with it with that official, obviously, during the interview.
Yeah, definitely. So, any referees interested in coming on and having a chat with us,
Yeah.
more than welcome to give us a shout. The final thing that listeners were talking about this week, Andy, was one of the suggestions was some lads were complaining about teams in the kind of lower divisions, or let's say even mostly this happens as Saturday teams, where you have an intermediate team as your Sunday team, and then your Saturday team is a junior team, and on the Saturday, some clubs may play a host of their intermediate players, especially in big games. Now, I think it's, for me, that kind of implies a huge level of pettiness if you have a Saturday team, and then when that Saturday team gets to a big game, a cup final or something, that you draft in all your intermediate players, if they're eligible, obviously, to play. And I've seen teams do it, floods the team with 5 or 6 first teamers. And then it's actually the Saturday team players who've got you to that stage of a competition are not getting a look in. So I've seen it happen before. What about your own experience, Andy? I know a lot of people kind of were giving out about it when it was one of the suggestions. What's your experience of it yourself?
I've a couple of different opinions on it, Derek, to be honest with you, and I'll give you two scenarios that I've sort of experienced over my time. We had maybe, let's say, 5-6 years ago, we had a Saturday major team that were just not good enough. Basically, they were about to be relegated, and I think with 3 or 4 games to go, um, we basically had to play a Sunday team every week to make sure that they didn't get relegated. So our Sunday side were playing back-to-back games, also trying to contend with a senior Sunday division title chase as well. That was a decision that was made for the club. Um, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that decision that was made, because it worked out in the end. We ended up staying up, I think, by 3 or 4 points in the end. A lot of people might disagree with that, but it's a club. We are, and again, a very, very cliche thing to say, but we are in this together. It is a team game, and the players that were playing the first 20 odd games of the season just didn't do it, and we had to make a decision to try and keep the club in the division. So yeah, you might say if you happen to be the team that went down that year, you'd say no, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But we had those tools at our disposal, and we didn't want to not use them. So in that example, I don't necessarily disagree with using the players. But then I've also seen situations where, you can sort of manipulate the rules in early competitions, at the early rounds of the competition, because senior players haven't played enough games in the league and stuff like that. So, there are a number of different sort of scenarios that it can happen.
Here's my take on it, right? And I don't know whether you obviously you might disagree with this, right? I think there's two instances where it's okay for we'll call it a Saturday team to play Sunday team players. Number one is if you don't have enough Saturday team players for whatever reason, half your team's gone away on holiday or whatever, and you need to
Yeah,
fulfill a fixture. Draft in 4 or 5 lads from the first team, and maybe lads who are on the fringes of the first team. Let's be honest, who are not getting a game in the first team, so you draft those lads in, and I think that's perfectly okay. Or when you have injured players coming back who are regular first teamers, but they need to get a few games under their belt before they come back into the first team, perfectly okay. I wouldn't be a fan of flooding Saturday teams with first team players, because in my view, if you don't have a Saturday team that's capable of competing in that league, then don't enter them in that league, or don't. Do you get what I mean? It's. I get if a team kind of loses a few players during the season and you have to draft in some of your first team players, but like I have to look at it from this perspective of the other team, what you were talking about there. Like you mentioned, the team that went down that season. Like, it's not really fair on them that they've been competing all season
yeah,
against, a team who probably wasn't good enough to stay in the division and probably should have been relegated. But then that team kind of floods their team with first team players. So I just don't think that's fair. I think if you're going to enter a Saturday team in a division, then that's your team for the season. Bar obviously the legal kind of route of, when you don't have enough players or players are coming back from injury. I think that's completely legitimate to play players from your first team in your Saturday team. At the end of the day, and probably more so to your point, it is a club, and players should be allowed to play for both sides for whatever reason. But I think this only comes into play, Andy, is when you have top teams who are flooding the Saturday team with kind of multiple kind of players week in, week out in big games. And I think that's only where it comes into it. I don't think on a regular bog standard Saturday, if you play two of your first team players in
yeah,
a Saturday game, I don't think that's an issue. And I think
yeah.
people
I
should
think
get over that a little bit. Like, if you were talking out on a Saturday and you see 2 or 3 lads from the first team playing on the Saturday team, get over it. You can play lads from your first team as well. Do you know what I mean? It's not, that's only 2 or 3 players. It's more so when it's a
yeah,
cup final or a cup semi-final or whatever, and 7 or 8 players from the first team are playing on the Saturday side, and then that's, in my view, that's a problem.
yeah. And I know. Look, I suppose a lot of clubs, it's a catch-22, because if you ask any senior division manager, I would hope that they say that the Saturday team are there as a backup, and that's no offense to
Yeah,
the Saturday team or squad, but you should be looking for players. In my opinion, if I'm a Sunday manager, Sunday division manager, and I have a Saturday team there, what I'm asking for is the manager to come in, and I'm saying, I want you to get a squad of players that are good enough or ambitious enough to want to play for the Sunday team.
Yeah.
So you're creating that environment, and it's effectively an extension of your own Sunday squad. Um, so in effect, it's one big squad. Do you know what I mean?
They do,
I
yeah, yeah.
don't think that I don't think there shouldn't. I don't believe there should be ever a time where they're sort of independent of each other. Like, I know, I'm just speaking from my own experience, and I don't know. I could be alone in this, but I like to think I'm not. Our teams have always trained together, but I
Mm.
know that there are teams across the top divisions, and some successful sides have actually trained like separately as teams.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that
I
myself.
actually, yeah, I find that unusual, because the reason I say that is because if you need a crossover of players, you're nearly having to cross a divide and reintroduce yourself and relearn what those lads are like, or you're reintegrating into a brand new group nearly, even though you're still the same football club. Um, so I think in our example, the lads simply sort of what's the word I'm looking, transfer just seamlessly across.
Yeah,
You could be in the Saturday squad some week, you could be in the Sunday. I know we've got 15, 16, 17-year-olds that have been playing probably 15 games for the Saturday side this year, and they'll come across and play 5 or 6 games for the Sunday side before the season is out. But they'll come across seamlessly because they know all the lads. They're used to playing with them. They're used to training with them. The senior lads will know their names and stuff like that. So it'll give them the confidence to be able to make that transition across a little bit easier.
yeah.
Again, look, it's all sort of, it's relative to the team that you're in or the club that you're in. But yeah, it's another interesting one, I suppose. And
Yeah, it'd be interesting to
I
hear other
wouldn't.
people's opinions. I know some people kind of sent us in opinions on it, but like I think we can all, like, I think when it comes to kind of cup finals or cup semi-finals, if your Saturday team has got you there, you then shouldn't be dropping those Saturday team players to play your first team players in that final. I think that's definitely wrong, because it's disrespectful to the players who got you to that stage of a competition.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you in that instance there, where if it is a cup final or if it's a huge game, I would tend to go with loyalty before sort of aiming for the glory as such. Um, yeah, 100% in those situations. But I think if there is a bit of crossover throughout the season, I don't think it should be frowned upon too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I suppose, where I'm at on that.
Right. We probably will agree on some and disagree on other points there, Andy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So look, that's listeners' corner. We had a few really good suggestions this week, and if you want to let us know some other topics you'd like us to discuss going forward, get in touch with myself or Andy, and we'll hopefully include them on the show. Um, we've a lot to look forward to this week as well, Andy. There's some really good games around the LSL, so perhaps we'll take a quick look at those. There's a couple of cup draws as well that we wanted to mention. So just to kind of kick off with that, there's a big game on. Is it Friday or Thursday? I'm not too sure. Newbridge against Glenville in the quarterfinal of the Cattle Cup. That's Newbridge kind of struggling a little bit in senior, and then Glenville. You know, I don't know. Like, could you see an upset happening there, Andy?
Yes, I could, and the only reason I'm saying that is because Newbridge are in obviously bad bit of form in the league,
Yeah,
so they might carry that in, and Glenville might fancy themselves. I know they're not. They've been a bit inconsistent in the division themselves in Senior One, but both teams have to look at this as a absolute fantastic chance to reach a cup semi final.
yeah,
The Cahill Cup, a really really big cup in this league. Um, so that's a big chance for them to make a semi-final. And then once you get to that stage, you never know what's going to happen.
yeah. It's cup football, as you said before. Another big game on Friday night to look forward to. Probably, I suppose you can call it a relegation battle. Cherry Orchard at home to Ballymun in the senior division. So both
Huge game, yeah.
teams struggling somewhat. Ballymun have put together the odd results, decent here and there. And Orchard last week, obviously, or last weekend, 2-2 draw against Bangor. So like both sides are capable of putting in performance and pulling a good result out of the bag. But that's a huge game there. In another one I've picked out is in the senior 1B is St. Kevin's against Cardiff. And the reason I mentioned that, it doesn't kind of stand out as a huge game. Kevin's are in third, Cardiff towards the end of the table. But like I mentioned earlier on, St. Kevin's have 5 games in hand over Cabarrus, and they need to win all 5 to draw level at the top. So there'll be a pressure on them there to kind of to make sure they're winning those games in hand. Another kind of huge one on Sunday to look forward to. I think this is going to be a cracking game, because I think there's been a few cracking games between these two sides already. Clester, Donecarney and Liffey Wanderers, and Clester are at home on that. Wasn't there one of those games that was really tight in one of the, was it the league or the cup, Andy? Can you remember?
I think it was the intermediate, wasn't it? It was the
The
round
intermediate.
beforehand where
Yeah,
it went to a replay. I think Cliffy's got a late equaliser to bring it down to Rings End, and then I think they were beaten just narrowly again then on the night. So yeah, there's I suppose Liffey's will be looking for a bit of retribution on the day there this Sunday. So yeah, another good cup tie, I would imagine. Leicester just into the semi-final of the FAI and back-to-back cup games now. So it'll be a tough enough game for them, and I'd say their legs will probably be heavy enough after the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Other games in the senior Sunday I've picked out, Bangor against Eden Derry. The reason I picked that out is Bangor obviously are at the top end of the table, and last week's result kind of disappointing for them. So they'll be looking to bounce straight back there. And then the other one that I picked out as well was Crumlin against Portmarnock. Again, if you look at the table, it doesn't look like a standout fixture, but if Crumlin don't win that game, they're not going to have a chance of winning the league. They've lost 5 already, I think, and unless they kind of arrest that decline as soon as possible, I'll call it this early. They're not going to be in the title race. So actually, they've lost 6 so far, 6 of the 14 that they've played, won 7, lost 6. So it's really, really patchy form. But in saying that, they still have 21 points, and they have games in hand over. They've 2 games in hand over Malahide at the top. So if they won those 2 games in hand, they're up to 27 points, only 4 points behind Malahide. But it's so strange that they've lost so many games and are still kind of, even though they're in 7th position, they're still in with a shout of getting back up the table. But what I'm saying is, with that game, if they don't win against Portmarnock, I think, I'll call it here that they won't be winning the league this season. I hope
Yeah, I wouldn't. Wouldn't rule many people out at the moment, Eric. This league is going to light up over the next few weeks because the backlog of games is going to kill a lot of people. I'm telling you now, you will see that table. The top 6, 7 teams will top and turn over the next 2 to 3 months.
I think you're right, but I hope I'm not made to eat me words there that I'm calling it. As I said, I'm saying if they don't win on this weekend against Portmarnock, they won't win the league. But if they do win, as I said, they could be straight back up there. Even with the amount of games they've lost, they could be straight back up towards the top end of the table.
Historically as well, they come with a late run every year. So, I wouldn't rule anyone out just yet.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see. In the senior 1 Sunday, big 2 actually massive big games. Sacred Heart Fairhouse Clover first against Home Farm in third. So first against third in that one. That should be a cracking game. And then also Lucan United, who are in second, against Killinamana, who are in fourth. So all of the top 4 playing against each other there. So probably actually the division to watch out for this weekend is the senior 1 Sunday, sponsored by the Beacon Hospital. So some cracking games there, Andy.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how those go, because I know Kilnamana have a few games in hand. Obviously, Lucan just winning with a late penalty there last week. So there's a lot to play for still in that league, and I suppose results might just tell you how it's going to end up at the end of the season. And again, I think there's a few games in hand for some of those teams and a lot of games to play. So as I said about the Sunday division, senior Sunday division, there's going to be tops and turns again in that division, I would imagine.
Definitely. And then a couple of other fixtures just wanted to give a mention to. In the senior 1B Sunday, Airfield United, who are in fourth, against Ardmore Rovers in fifth. That's a huge game for both sides. Obviously both of them looking for promotion this season, so both will be looking for a win there to make sure that they're fighting for those kind of promotion spots come the end of the season. So interesting one to watch out for. And then on Saturday, I know I'm kind of skipping backwards Saturday, but there's a few LFA Junior Cup games. 5th round, Dublin Bus against Eden Derry Town and Skerries Town against Oliver Bond. Obviously on the back of that big win in the FAI Junior Cup. They travel over to Skerries on Saturday as well. Couple of cup draws to mention, Andy. I'll do the Lumley O'Reilly. So the Lumley O'Reilly is quarter-final draw. Collinstown against Hartstown, Huntstown FC. You have Rathout Harps against Castleknock Celtic. You have Arklow Town against Templeogue United, and you have St Francis FC against Drumcondra. So that's the quarter-final of the Lumley O'Reilly. I think you also have do you have the Lanigan Cup draw quarter-final?
Lanigan Cup, quarter-final. So you've got Liffey's against Glenville, St James's, Pegasus St James's Athletic against Boot Road Celtic, Sacred Heart Fairhouse Clover against St John Bosco, and then there's the winners of Cole Park and Bluebell. Will play the winners of Wayside and Bangor GG. So yeah, there's still some really good sides still in that competition. So yeah, it's still a lot to play for. As I said, this could go anyway at this stage in this competition. There's been some really big upsets in some of the Saturday competitions already this year. So if I think if just someone puts a bit of consistency and a run together, they can potentially look at a route to the final.
Definitely. I'm not quite sure on the dates yet for those fixtures, but if and when we get them, we'll let you know on the podcast. So yeah, that's more or less it, Andy, for this week. Obviously, if the FAI Junior Cup draw tomorrow, it should be streamed live online, I'm told. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll see how the LSL teams, Rush Athletic, Usher, Celtic, and Oliver Bond Celtic get on in that quarter-final draw. If you're at a game this weekend, as always, use the LSL live score hashtag to keep us informed on what's happening around the league. Anything to add, Andy?
No, I suppose. Look, I'll put a tweet out during the week in relation to sort of coming back to us with any feedback or any topics. Just we're trying to encourage a little bit more interaction. So don't be afraid to put your suggestions forward, and we'll try and stick it in the listeners' corner going forward.
Definitely. And another thing we wanted to mention as well is I know we're quite kind of focused at the moment on covering the intermediate divisions. It's kind of what myself and Andy know best. But if you feel like you have a lot of knowledge on one of the Saturday divisions that perhaps we're not covering at the moment, and you'd like to pop on the show for 10 minutes and tell us a bit about that league, that particular division, by all means get in touch with myself or Andy, and we'd be happy to have people on to talk to us about the various divisions around the LSL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good stuff.
Cool. All right, Andy, pleasure to speak to you again, and look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Thanks, Derek. Bye-bye.